The Unification of Humankind.
This one is like the most interesting, I think, because it's a new way of thinking on three big things that are part of our lives, right, inextricably. Oh, well, maybe not in so much, but definitely part of history. Money, empires,
Money.
and that sweet dough. That sweet dough, empires, and religion. And so the money chapter is very interesting, right? Like how it evolved. What I find interesting about the evolution of money is that this kind of feeds into something that we were talking about earlier. Is had you reset the whole thing again, would it all have happened the same way? So money, like, and even farming, evolved separately in the sense that there were two tribes that had no contact with each other at all, but the principle of money evolved still.
Yeah.
A way of having like something that represents value that you could store and everyone agrees on. That's an interesting concept, right? It's like, so it wasn't that someone discovered it and then everyone started using it. A lot of history is like that, right? With math, for example, the Indians made the numbers, the Arabs figured out how it was useful, and then Europe just used it.
Yeah.
But with money and stuff, right, is again, there was spreading of coins, or I think it was called shekels first, right? The first silver coin.
I think those are the first ones.
Like in Mesopotamia that they had used. Became first like silver, then gold, or any kind of like rare metal, then bronze, and then
some shiny stuff.
Some shiny stuff, right?
Shiny
to
metals.
represent value.
Yeah.
But a lot of this evolved like individually. I think China had its own, or ancient Chinese like Han Dynasty societies had their own unit of measure that value. Harappa in India also had the same. The Incas as well had some sort of like unit of value that they would use, and these tribes never really spoke to each other. Maybe China and India did, and India and Rome definitely did, but like South American were just separate from everything. How did they get money? Where did they get the idea from? It's kind of interesting, right?
I did a podcast episode on what ancient artifacts tell us about humankind, and you go to I go to the Field Museum all the time, and you see. You'll go check out Africa and like, the Pacific. You go to the Pacific, you go to the Americas, and there's Egypt and Asia. And all the artifacts are pretty similar.
Yeah.
And it's like, they didn't have any interaction with each other.
Yeah.
They didn't know about each other's existence, yet all the same things show up.
I think that comes from the myth building. Like from the cognitive revolution, right? Once we figured out how to create stories and myths that we all collectively believed in, a lot of those stories tended to be the same thing, right? Like every religion, every monotheist religion, largely the same, right? Some dude figured it out and then told everyone how to live, right? Largely the same concept. It's not that surprising. Maybe like the details of the story would be different. Maybe we would have used twigs or something that wasn't precious for money instead of something that was precious. I don't think it had to be something that was rare. I feel like that was just happenstance.
Yeah.
I think that was just happenstance.
Yeah.
Like the way our society was like, oh, this is rare to find. I like things that are rare to find. Why? Like, for what joy? Use the thing that's easier to find, right? Like, how does that matter? It's money. Like, is it? We use paper now, right? So yeah, you're right. The artifacts being similar is interesting.
So we have all these different empires. They're kind of gobbling each other up throughout time, and
and empires. The interesting thing there is, it was never. Well, a lot of it, like, and again, these are very broad brushstrokes because he's all of humanity, right? Not every empire was like impositional, like you have to follow our culture. A lot of them was like when when they'd conquer their subjects, the subjects would take on parts of like that same empire. And I think he'll do this very elegantly with so Roman and like the ancient Eastern European, what's now Armenia, right? Like how the Roman emperor taken them. Those folks became more Roman and demanded to be treated like Romans, but then the Roman emperor was like, no, we don't want to do that. Then when the Roman Empire collapsed, those people essentially came out living Roman lives, like Romans. Okay, great. Now let's look at Middle East. I think Assyrian Empire, or whatever the first Islamic Middle Eastern empire, right? had done the same for Turkey and Iran, which are not Islamic Arabs, but now they are.
Yeah.
How did that happen? Well, same cycle, right? The empire was there, these became subjects. Those subjects started to take on those practices and demanded to be treated the same way as the regular Arabs are. The empire was like, nah, we don't want to do that. Lots of war, lots of bloodshed. When the empire fell, you now have Turkish Arabs and Iranian Arabs, right? So this unification of humankind idea was that through empires, we actually did evolve like a collective identity. And, it's been bloody, it's been patchy as well, but it worked. I think the final comparison is colonialism, which is so true, right? Like, India is a great example where it comes to be liberal now. With like, chai is a drink, we're all cricket lovers. Those are British things, right?
Yeah.
We definitely got that from them. But yeah, and so like even the idea of a democracy, the idea of like voting and stuff like that, definitely these like liberal traditions that were imported, that when we decided to say, okay, self-represent and can you give this to us, they were like, no, absolutely not. Like, you shouldn't do this. I know I'm doing it, but you shouldn't do it. But when they actually left and the British Empire fell, like all the colonies adopted it, right? Nigeria did, even China, and Hong Kong at least. Well, not anymore, but...
That's another story.
Yeah, a different episode, maybe. But yeah, so the Empire's topic is interesting because I think that another thing that he does, which is nice, he debunks myths, right? Like we are taught that empires are unsustainable and bad systems of governance. Dude, newsflash, like 2,500 years of human history had empires as the most stable form of government. Yeah. It is only in the last like 150 years that in 1789 when peasants in France were like, oh hey, you know what, we should do this actually. So, only like it's a very new idea in the larger scale of human history to have the masses actually have any say. Empires are actually the more culturally dominant way of and it's so maybe that's why when we think of group dynamics, maybe that's why in male dynamics there's this concept of alpha male, because we are so tuned to thinking of one person leading, because of the past 1,500 years of the way our social systems and political systems are. I know that's a bit of a stretch, but I feel like
it's not too much of a stretch, I don't think.
I feel like this is where Sapiens has changed me, where I take any aspect of the way we live life and trace it back to something ancient, and has shaped that's the myth, right? That is still resonant with us today.
How far do you think most people's idea of history goes?
I think people erroneously assume that before agriculture, it is prehistory, we were all cavemen.
Yeah.
And I think agricultural revolution generally is where people start to think of history in the sense of we started writing things down in civilization. So I don't think it's accurate, right? Because for two reasons. One, prehistory then was way longer, right? Than this. Agriculture is the stuff that we've done is in a very short time frame relative to this evolutionary scale. And so we can't discount, because biologically we're very similar to that prehistorical ape, right?
Yeah, so this is what, 12,000 years?
Yeah, 12,000 years, of
but
which
then
we've written
tens of thousands of years?
Yeah. 80, 100, right?
Yeah.
80, the scale is insane. And the thing is our brains aren't good at large numbers, right? So yeah, it's hard for us to actually visualize how much of time that is. That's a lot of freaking time, right?
Something I was thinking about in the Field Museum, evaluating all these ancient artifacts and stuff. Something I don't think people think about is I think people always had a sense of humor.
Oh, sure.
We don't think of these people living way back when as being funny or.
No, I'm sure they did. Yeah.
But a lot of them, these cultures, created masks to tell stories and stuff.
Interesting. Yeah, there's there's that cave painting of the prehistoric man. I don't want to use the word, but the pre-agricultural revolution, Homo sapiens, right? Where a bunch of people put their hands on a cave.
Yeah.
And I read that as I was here. When you leave a sandprint, it's the same thing, right? The joy of saying, or if you see wet concrete, putting your hand.
I'm gonna put this here and it'll be here forever.
Exactly, right? To leave a mark.
Yeah.
Is such a uniquely human desire.
Yeah.
It's I think you're right. I don't think that we've changed that much biologically from way back then to now. You know, we are seeing like, you know, people like shorter attention spans because of phones. Yeah, like you do see like change, of course. But I think that your DNA thinks you're in the savannah and like you're on the hunt for a growl, or like that's why you still have those reflexes and stuff like that. I mean, that he makes you. It's a humbling book, you know. I think
it's very humbling.
Yeah.